Today's video covers the so-called minimum variance portfolio in portfolio theory. The minimum variance portfolio is the portfolio where the combination of securities achieves the lowest variance and thus the lowest risk. But why does low variance correspond to low risk? It's actually quite simple. Variance measures the fluctuation around the mean. The greater the fluctuation, the more unpredictable the price movements of the security. Securities with lower fluctuations are easier to assess and therefore less risky. Let's take a simplified graphical look at the minimum variance portfolio. On the x-axis, we have the standard deviation, sigma. The standard deviation is simply the square root of the variance, which gives the variance more interpretive value. In portfolio theory, as already explained, variance and thus standard deviation are generally understood as measures of risk. The higher the fluctuations of the security, measured by the standard deviation, the riskier the security. Lower fluctuation, on the other hand, corresponds to lower risk. On the y-axis, we have the expected return. This axis indicates the return that can be expected. Portfolio theory has already demonstrated the so-called diversification effect, which shows that adding as many negatively correlated, opposite-moving securities as possible reduces the portfolio's risk. For instance, if some securities in the portfolio decline, others that are negatively correlated will rise, balancing out the movements. The blue line on the graph represents the so-called efficient frontier, which, as the name suggests, shows all possible efficient portfolios. But why are these portfolios considered efficient? Portfolio 1 and Portfolio 2 have the same standard deviation as Portfolio 3 and Portfolio 4. The difference is that Portfolio 1 and Portfolio 2 dominate Portfolio 3 and Portfolio 4 and are therefore considered efficient, as Portfolio 1 and Portfolio 2 offer a higher expected return on the y-axis for the same standard deviation on the x-axis. Investors should therefore choose the efficient Portfolio 1 or Portfolio 2. The turning point on the graph is the so-called minimum variance portfolio, where the value of variance or the value of standard deviation is minimized. This exact point can also be calculated. The formula for calculating the minimum variance portfolio, which consists of two securities, is weight of security, A, for the allocation of the first security, which will also determine the share of the second security, equals variance of B, the variance of security B, minus standard deviation of A, the standard deviation of security A, times standard deviation of B, the standard deviation of security B, times correlation coefficient between security A and security B, divided by variance of A plus variance of B minus 2 times standard deviation of A times standard deviation of B times correlation coefficient between the two securities. So that's the theory for now. Let's move on to an example to understand how to calculate the minimum variance portfolio. We are tasked with calculating the minimum variance portfolio for securities A and B. Security A has a standard deviation of 0.7, while security B has a standard deviation of 0.5. The correlation coefficient between the two securities is 0.5. Substituting these values into the formula, we get weight of security A equals 0.5 squared for the variance of security B minus 0.7 for the standard deviation of security A times 0.5 for the standard deviation of security B times 0.5 for the correlation coefficient between the two securities divided by 0.7 squared for the variance of security A plus 0.5 squared for the variance of security B minus 2 times 0.7 for the standard deviation of security A times 0.5 for the standard deviation of security B times 0.5 for the correlation coefficient. The weight of security A is therefore 19.23%. If we now subtract this from 1, we get the proportion of the second security. Thus, our minimum variance portfolio consists of 19.23% in security A and 80.77% in security B. An investor aiming to construct a portfolio with the lowest variance should invest in the two securities in these proportions. We hope this video has helped you understand the topic of the minimum variance portfolio. See you next time and have a good one.